I've approached this, I guess, a bit like a bit of speed dating to try to convey to you some of the areas of research that I'm involved in, which touches on ageing. So some of them are quite explicit, some of them are a bit more tangential. There's three broad areas which, at the moment, where I investigate the role of ageing when it comes to financial decision making. So it's fundamentally about financial decision making. And the three broad areas are governed by where I get the data from. One area of data I get from financial institutions. And so I look at the actual financial choices that people are making. So, for example, engaging with superannuation funds to look at investment choices that people are making. So we're particularly interested at the moment looking at what's been happening over the past decade, really, in terms of people as they're transitioning to retirement and opening up account-based pensions, and the investment choices that they're making, the relative risks that they're taking in those choices, and what we've seen over the past decade, this significant decline in the amount of risk that people are taking on when they're opening these accounts. So we're looking at actual revealed choices that people are making. This doesn't appear.
You don't have to point it at the machine underneath.
Right. Why not? Other sources of data relate to what people tell us that they're doing. So surveys linked to, one of them linked to what Julie was talking about earlier about values. So we're leveraging off some of the information that Julie has collected, and so we're looking at a particular area, looking at people's risk tolerance as they're ageing and as, again, they're progressing through retirement. And we're linking that to perceptions about longevity risk and how people are making decisions about how much of their resources they choose to consume and how that might be different to their financial risk tolerance that they may have expressed throughout their life as they've been making investment decisions. So that's survey-based data. The other data that we're looking at, which I'll talk a little bit more about today, is again survey data which is looking at the quality of the decisions that people are making. And when we talk about the quality of decisions, we look at some objective measures of quality of financial decisions, and we try to marry that with assessments of people's cognitive ability. And so we do some of those on a subjective basis, so we're basically asking people to self-report, and we're increasingly trying to get more objective measures. And what we're interested in is, I guess, how people themselves are wanting to engage in doing these assessments of their cognitive ability, and what's the most amenable form to do it, who they're willing to do that with, and what their experience is of doing those assessments. So I'll talk a little bit more about that third part here. And what I'm really interested in this is in looking at the role of cognitive decline in financial decision making is not with people who have a diagnosed impairment. It's really in the window of time between people perhaps perceive that they have some symptoms of cognitive decline and the time at which they then go and first seek a consultation to confirm that or to gather more information, and then the final time of diagnosis, because we know that there's a significant period of time that happens, and so that could be quite long. And over that period of time, there can be some significant financial decisions that have to get made. So we're really interested in prior to a formal diagnosis. And the sorts of questions that we're interested in is how does our financial literacy, so our knowledge and our skills in terms of making financial decisions and our ability to draw on that knowledge and skills to make decisions, how does that change over the life cycle? How does that change with age? We know that we get some benefit as we age, but we also know that some of our ability declines. What specific financial decisions are impacted as we age? What's our awareness of it, and who do we trust to go and ask people about that, to try to maintain the quality of our financial decisions. What do we know? If we look at some of the available evidence, we know that from some US evidence, as decline is increasing, so formal assessments of cognitive decline, the quality of financial choices, the quality of health choices, scam susceptibility increases as well. The scam susceptibility is something that we've tried to explore, but it's a very difficult one to actually tap and measure accurately. We haven't had as much success as some of the published US evidence in that area. Some of the evidence in terms of where people have actually gone and looked at financial decisions that people have made, we see the benefits of getting older in that the older participants do some of the investment basics better, so they diversify, they're not overconfident. But we also see evidence of the decline in evidenced in fluid intelligence, so the ability to adapt, so making new decisions, so the quality of the diversification, the quality of some choices. So for example, the example there of making debt choices. So when credit card teaser rates are offered, the ability of people to recognise what's the optimal choice of what sort of purchase should I use on my old card, what should I use on my new card, and how that varies by age. I guess the somewhat depressing thing about that research is it identifies this magical age of 42, which is the supposed peak of decisions. So that's where people appear to be getting the best financial deal at that age. And what the evidence also tells us is that people, this particular bit of research was from people who were known to have a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment. They overestimate their ability, but also the informants with those people also overestimate their ability as well. So what we've done, I partnered up with a group of people. The continuing person is Joe Earl, who's currently at Flinders University. And so we've been doing some surveys looking at assessing people's cognitive ability. From that research, this first research is just looking at as people rate themselves, so their self-rated cognitive ability, as indicators of behavioural problems with cognitive ability increase. We see financial literacy declining. We see retirement self-efficacy declining. So that was self-assessment. We've now moved to objective assessments, and we're using CANTAB technologies based out of Cambridge University, which are tablet-based measures to try to assess cognitive ability. So just to give you a flavour of those, these are tests which in effect try to assess number of errors at tasks like recognising where patterns are within of shapes within a pattern, or recognising number sequences, recognising where hidden tokens are within a pattern. So these assessments get done, originally they were getting done on tablets, so iPads and so on, but they had to be done in person. The most recent one that we've done, we teamed up with National Seniors Australia, and the CANTAB is now being rolled out online, so we're looking at the functionality of that online and people's willingness to engage in that. So we've done that. We've developed the stage one. We've got over 500 people who have done some baseline assessments. We've got more than 300 people who've done both a subjective and the CANTAB technology. Some of the results that we're getting from that, so we're interested in both their financial decision-making ability, their cognitive assessments, but we're also now moving into people's willingness to go and get these tests done. Where do they want to get them done? What's their experience of doing them? And then how much would they be willing to pay on them? It's a bit like the music on the Academy Awards. I know I'm going to get pushed out in a minute. So we know that those people, just doing some very preliminary results, those people who are less likely to consult their partner about some symptoms or a GP, they have higher errors in their subjective and objective measures. Those who are less likely have also got the lower self-report cognitive ability. Those most likely to seek no advice at all are the ones on the lower financial literacy scores, and they're again making more cognitive errors. There's a preference for getting things done on the computer. There's a preference for doing things on a tablet, so people are amenable to do this. There's a bit of a selection bias in what we've got. Most people are wanting to engage in this at home. And people are willing to pay for it, but a sizable proportion only wanting to do it with their health insurance. What we're wanting to do is broaden our collaboration with other people, so to broaden with other partners who are interested, to keep going back, because we've got cross-sectional analysis. What we really want to do is build longitudinal profiles. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Fascinating stuff. We're going to do the same thing again, gathering some questions and then ask Paul to respond. Please.
There are some things about the study that trouble me, not a little. And one of them is the assumption that mild cognitive impairment necessarily leads to, great cognitive decline, that it's predictive. And I think there are a couple of things here that are really important. One is to understand what some of the interventions are where people recognise that they're experiencing mild cognitive impairment, and some of the things that actually increase their judgment, their capability, and also putting in place things that will assess them in decision making. The second thing is that given the huge fear and anxiety narrative that is currently pervasive in our culture around having a diagnosis of dementia, once it's out there, you can't take it back. And the consequences of actually having a formal assessment and then the kinds of ramifications that come around judgments of you lose perhaps work that you're doing, your driver's license goes, your social circles start to contract because people know something about the diagnosis. I think there are all kinds of things here which are confounds, which doesn't take away from the importance of helping people understand that their ability to make decisions, wise decisions about their money, are important. But I think it's really important in this sort of research to put in place some really good guidelines as to what financial literacy as you get older really entails, where to go for very good counsel and advice, and also what it's going to cost you to get that counsel and advice, and the kinds of protections that you should be looking for. So I hope that some of those things in this research are in place. I'm not a dummy, but I find financial literacy around the changing context of pension allocations, the sorts of investment decisions that are wise or not wise, what kind of drawdown to look at in terms of expected longevity, are not simple decisions.
No,
Just quickly.
yeah, fundamentally we're interested in all those areas that you've raised, yeah.
And we do recognise the complexity of them all, but within, so I've touched on some of the aspects, within the surveys that we're doing, we are touching on some of those things that you raised as well. And what we're trying to emphasise in this is an independence, so this is people themselves trying to give people information individually, so not necessarily via a formal structure to do it, and trying to work out what's the best way to do that.
Thanks, Paul. We're just going to gather in the last couple of questions and then respond to them all at once. Veronica?
And just a comment, and you've probably looked at collaboration with Alzheimer's WA, but Nick Bruni and Associates provides free workshops through, alongside Alzheimer's WA for people living with dementia. That's been really, really useful. So yeah, just wondering about that. And also, and you're probably aware of this as well, that 70% of people that have been diagnosed with dementia live in the community, and 30% of that 70% live alone. So that making financial decisions would be really challenging if you're living alone, depending on how much support you have.
Thanks.
Any further comments or questions? Would you like to respond?
Well, yeah, I'll follow up on that. Yeah, really just again to go back to that, the first comments and suggestions. Yeah, they are issues that we are very much aware of, and trying our best to, I guess, to couple just doing these baseline assessments, and then as we're going through, trying to tap into some of these other areas which look at the engagement with the process and the consequences that follow on from that as well.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Paul.